The next section I want to talk about is the data model, or more well known as the business object model. So you will see that I have expanded my project for my business object model. In there you can see the normal classes, you can see the cases as well as the enumerations. One thing that is maybe important to say right here in the beginning is if you have selected this little icon, the project explorer and the actual piece that you see in the design time view will always stay in sync. So for instance, if you click on a process in a project, it'll show you the process on this side. Or if you click on a process in this designer, you will see the process highlighted on this side. So that's just as a side item. So cases store information about objects of the solution, for instance, a patient, an order, an application. You can see I have some cases in my solution that I've created. Cases can be related to each other. For instance, an order is related to a patient, and an order is related, in this case, to a provider or a doctor, and a patient is related to notes. So you can see that these items will show the relation. So in this case, every patient can have multiple orders for blood tests that this doctor can order. And a patient could have multiple doctors that can order multiple orders for blood tests. So those are the relations. And what this does, they actually allow you to navigate between the different objects when you have deployed the actual solution. You can see this in the case manager. I've just opened up a order, so you can see there's my order with the life cycle, which I'll talk about a little later. You can see the order details. On the right hand side, you can see work items, you can see linked cases, documents, and audit. But you can see these linked cases allows you to navigate to the patient that owns this order. So you can see if I click on it, it actually takes you to the patient, and then it can actually take you back to the order. It's also possible to navigate to the actual provider and to navigate back to the order itself. So these relationships that is set up helps you to navigate. For instance, a customer or a patient calls into a call center and he says his name is XYZ. You can search for the patient, and from there you can actually go to the order that's been created for the specific patient. So it's very, very handy to have these relationships between different objects or cases in the system. Very importantly, if I look at a case, you will see I have an ID and a state. These are required in a case object in my data model. One other thing that is required is the actual state, terminal state. So if I look at that, you can see that there is always a requirement to have at least one terminal state for that case that we have. So we can see in this case I have an order and I have the order states, and the last state in my case lifecycle is the actual results provided, and you can see that it is selected over there. Classes are objects that will explain certain attributes that is defined in the rest of the case data model. So for instance, you can see I've got an address, and I can see what the address object looks like. In my data model, I only use it in one place for the actual patient, but you could use this address in multiple different cases if you need to do that. So that is very, very handy. The next thing that I want to talk about are enumerations. Enumerations are static lists that can be used for different things. First of all, in the case data model, they are used for the actual life cycle states or milestones. And I'll talk about states and I'll talk about milestones in this series. They all mean the same thing. So order, in my case, has a life cycle, and these are the different milestones or events or states that it can go through from the initiation to the completion of this order that we manage. What it's also used for are just drop-down lists that are static, that can be displayed on forms in the actual solution once you create it. Very, very important thing. You cannot delete a milestone or a enumeration item when you have first deployed and have a project running. That will break your data model and it will fail when you deploy your data model. So you can actually add elements to your enumeration, but you cannot delete an item. And the same goes for an attribute in your data model. It's like a database. If you have an application that looks at a database and you delete a data field in your database, that application is going to be out of sync and it's not going to work. So it's the same principle in this regard. So let's look at a couple of the best practices when it comes to creating data models. You will see that my data model has plain English written attributes. Very important. These attributes that you see on the screen are used to generate the form or the user interface that the person that will use the application will interact with. So always use the language of the attributes to a business level. You will see when I click on an item, I have a label and I have a name field. So the name is what the system uses in the background, and the label is what the user sees in the form. Business process management are created for business users, and business users don't want to see technical jargon, especially if it's in a sales or a prototype solution. Business users always want to see business language. So it's very important to keep the attribute names to a business level. Data models that is created are used to create artifacts that people or business users will see. Looking at my data model, you will see that I have a name that is what the data object model is named, and this name you will see when you actually deploy this data model to your administrator. I always create a data model and I postfix it with a BOM, which shows me a business object model. Very important, when you go to your administrator, you're going to see the artifacts and you're going to wonder what these artifacts are. Clearly show the actual type of artifact so that you know what you need to change and what you need to deploy and undeploy. It's very, very handy in the solution. By default, the names that created as a sample string in, and you want to change that to make more sense. In this case, it is com.libit panel order underscore bomb. Organizations use their own name, the area, and the solution name that they created. So make these names that is understandable and defines what they are used for. Data models will always be deployed separately to the rest of the project. You cannot include a process in a data model project. So very, very important to remember. You will see that my attributes that I have are mostly 0 to 1, which means it is optional. If it just says 1, for instance, just 1, it means that that is a required element. So for demonstration purposes, when I build my demos, I always create elements with read-only attributes. And the reason for that is it makes your demonstration much easier. If you need to show required type fields, to show that little asterisk on a form that's generated, by all means, do that. But it just makes it easier to demonstrate attributes in a business object model if they are optional. So that is more or less what I wanted to talk about around my data model.